Welcome to the Travel Gluten-Free podcast, where you can listen in on how to lead a gluten-free lifestyle with more fun and ease. Travel gluten-free is like having a best friend by your side to give you the most up-to-date gluten-free traveler information. Let Travel Gluten-Free be your number one source for tips, tricks, and advice you can use to safely navigate your next gluten-free travel adventure. Enjoy food, enjoy travel, and enjoy life. And now, here's your show host, Illiquity.
Hey friends, Illiquity here with another episode of the Travel Gluten-Free podcast. I'm so excited to have another guest on my podcast today and someone who I've connected with on Instagram. So today I would like you to meet Angus. Angus is a gluten-free athlete and he's here to talk to us and share us his story. Angus, welcome to the Travel Gluten-Free podcast.
Thanks so much for having me. Really excited to be here and chat a bit more about the gluten-free athlete and just traveling, living gluten-free.
So I like to start every episode and get your backstory. So because everybody has such a different story to tell how they found out they had celiac disease. How did you find out you had celiac disease? Like, was it a surprise? Did you have symptoms? Like, how did you find out?
Yep. So when I found out I had celiac disease, it was a really kind of strange period in my life. I was 17 years old. So I found out a little bit later on. And it was at a time where I had a lot of things going on. So for anyone who knows a bit about Australian rules football, essentially I got diagnosed a week before the AFL draft combine, which is very similar to the NFL draft combine. There's a range of fitness testing and they pretty much assess your athletic capabilities in front of a range of recruiters. So for about 6 months leading up to that, I had symptoms and was really sick. Essentially, I had no idea what was going on. I was just so confused. As most athletes do, they load up on carbs. So I was having a lot of pizza and pasta. As you could imagine, the next morning, just feeling so sick and having no idea what it was. So a week before that testing, I ended up getting a blood test and gastroscopy and found out that I had celiac disease. A bit of a naive 17-year-old. I had no idea what celiac disease was. So it was quite confronting. I had real little awareness about the condition. My GP told me just follow a gluten-free diet. Essentially, I had all these issues such as iron deficiency, vitamin D deficiency. I mean, if you saw photos of me at the time, I was so pale. I was just in such a bad way, just so sick. And I then had to front up and test in front of all these AFL club recruiters. And one of the testing, all of the clubs had doctors and physios in like a Colosseum-shaped circle in this room around a physio bed. And each player had a specific number. And out of the 68 players in Australia who got invited to test, I was number 40, and they read out my name in this screen, in this room on this big screen with a host, obviously, saying Angus Hanrahan, number 40, and then they'd read out my medical history. So I expected them to talk about a shoulder injury, a few little things I had, so I wasn't concerned at all because obviously, as the GP said to me, just follow a gluten-free diet and you'll be okay. When my medical history got read out, obviously celiac disease was addressed. The host asked if any clubs wanted to, or any team, wanted to speak to Angus, come forward and speak to him. So luckily enough, a few clubs stepped forward and they asked me questions. I was absolutely shocked and panicked a little bit because I was getting peppered with questions about celiac disease, and they were asking me about did I have anemia, all these different deficiencies and all these issues which essentially could have affected my ability to play at the highest level or compete at my best, essentially. And obviously I didn't do any research or had no awareness. I ended up just kind of panicking and felt a bit embarrassed because I didn't know how to answer these questions. What happened after that was I went home. The testing didn't end up testing actually because I was still so sick. Research straight away, athletes with celiac disease, anything I could find about the condition relating to sport. And I was really concerned because I really struggled to find a lot of information about it. For me, that was really confronting because I was just really stressed out about the whole situation. So essentially that, looking back and reflecting on that situation and how I really struggled, and I feel like I could have really used something like my page, The Gluten-Free Athlete at the time, especially because a lot of the symptoms and issues with celiac disease are actually really relevant to athletic performance. So for an aspiring professional athlete, that was really concerning that I really struggled to find, one, inspiration, and two, information and help to ensure I could still achieve my goals. So that was pretty much my story and with the disease, but also obviously my main inspiration behind starting the Gluten-Free Athlete.
So I have a few questions for you based on what you had just told about your story. So first of all, I'm wondering, because celiac disease is inherited, does anyone else in your family have celiac disease or an autoimmune disease?
No, literally no one in my family had celiac disease. No one really knew much about it either. So it was absolutely bizarre that it came out. A few family members have had diabetes, but not really relevant to celiac disease, or no one's had that specific condition. Maybe they did, but didn't get diagnosed because it's still commonly undiagnosed with a lot of people, but no one that we know of.
Well, I know depending on the diabetes, because there is a form of diabetes that is autoimmune. And there also too, like both your parents could have a recessive gene and not have had it and probably passed it on to you too.
Yeah, 100%. I think that's my headspace. I don't like to speculate too much, but I think that's where my headspace is at with how I got it. But it's, yeah, obviously no one in my family eats gluten-free. So yeah, it was a bit of a shock for sure.
And so when your doctor told you like eat a gluten-free diet, did he give you a list of things to avoid? Like, or did he just say like, because I've had people on my show and literally their doctor just told them, Google it. Like they didn't even refer them to like a nutritionist or someone who can help them choose the right food.
Yeah, that's a good point, because I was actually really embarrassed looking back on it, because I didn't see a nutritionist for about 3 years after I got diagnosed. And I think that's the point you make. A lot of people just Google it. And I do appreciate my GP at the time, because she was just trying to calm me down and not make a big deal out of it, because it was a really stressful period of my life. But the reality is I just wasn't aware of how serious the condition was. And it took me so long to see a nutritionist, which is just bizarre considering the level of sport I was playing at the time as well.
So I know my son plays sports and they have like I think a nutritionist or something like for their team, or that comes in and helps out with the team, like when they have questions. Did you have any access to that through your sport?
I did on a referral basis. So we didn't have someone within the club. Obviously at the AFL level, you definitely do. But at the level, because obviously after the draft combine, I ended up missing out on the draft. Club I played for after, which was reserves level below AFL, they didn't have the funding for a nutritionist, so I'd have to go outsource that myself. And I still didn't fully comprehend how big of an issue that was, and how important it was for me to see a nutritionist, regardless if I was an athlete or just anyone really who just had the condition.
Like in your defense, as a teenager, as a 17-year-old teenager, I would have never thought of going to a nutritionist. Like when you're a teenager, that's like the last thing you think of is going to a nutritionist. You just think of like, where's my next meal?
Yeah, 100%. I was literally just thinking, can I get through today? Where can I eat? Not thinking about, seeing a nutritionist or taking it overly serious, which was just so stupid looking back on it.
I mean, well, that's the thing, right? Because like I remember when I found out I was gluten-free, I'm Italian, and like we ate so much pasta and bread growing up as a kid. I think I just cried for 3 days when I found out, because I thought like I would never eat pasta again and all this, because I didn't know any better. And then when I started finally getting into it a lot, then I figured, okay, my life is not over. I can still eat pasta and bread, just not with gluten in it. Yeah, there's not a lot of information out there, which is one of the reasons why I started this podcast, because it's amazing the lack of information that's out there. But one of the things I know you guys have, I know Canada has one too, is you guys have like a National Celiac Association, which is the Australian Celiac Association. Did you discover them? And if so, when did you find them?
Yeah, so we have obviously Celiac Australia. You know, they do amazing things for the community, obviously. I was just at one of their expos they hosted in Sydney. So so obviously they do a great job, but similar to the nutritionist, I had no idea about them. It wasn't really well advertised to me, even though they're so important to just at least be aware of them. I mean, you don't have to, they have a membership program where they offer resources. They really help. You don't necessarily need to sign up to their membership program. Just being aware of them, and just more importantly, knowing you have a supportive community there as well and you're not alone. That's what I really like about the work they do. Obviously, I think for me, especially with my friendship groups, my family, obviously no one else eats gluten-free. It can be really isolating. So I think it's really important that you can obviously share the experience with people who are like-minded and can help you out and are going through the same thing.
I experienced that too, where my daughter is celiac, so when she lives with us, so we both eat gluten-free, but like when I'm going out with friends and I'm the only gluten-free person, you kind of feels like you get singled out, but it's really awesome when you go out with other people who have specifically celiac disease, because then you're all in the same boat and you can all share your food and it feels like more normal.
Yeah, it's a strange connection, isn't it? When you find out someone else is gluten-free, it's like an instant friendship.
It totally is, because I've been to podcast conferences and I get up and I introduce myself and I say, my podcast is Travel Gluten-Free. And every time I say that, someone comes up to me afterwards and they're like, I'm celiac too. And like, yeah, we instantly bond.
Yeah. Well, there's just so much to bond over because one, it's so difficult. Two, like everyone's just trying to work out the best possible food options and any little tip they can get because it is really hard. So no, you're right. I've had a few instances like that as well, where you just instantly connect with someone and everyone's just so excited to find out that there's someone else who eats gluten-free.
Right? So have you found other people in your sport? And for Americans who are listening who aren't sure what the AFL is, just kind of give us a little 411 on that. But have you found other people in the AFL who also have celiac disease?
Yep. So I would say in every sporting team, whether that's a team of 20 people, 10 people, no matter how many, I'd say there's always been at least one or two other people who eats gluten-free. And to be fair, it's not something everyone openly comes out and talks about. It's more so I've had to dig a bit deeper and ask, and then over time I've kind of find out that they actually eat gluten-free, and it is a lot more common than a lot of people think. And obviously the AFL, it's I'll just try and give a background on it. It is a really difficult sport to understand. Even if you just search up on YouTube AFL, you'll probably have a headache for about 20 minutes. It's a game where there's a lot of running, there's a lot of combat as well, so it's very physical. A lot of people would say it's one of the hardest sports to play in terms of the toll it takes on your body with all the running you have to do, but also the physicality with tackling. So yeah, if you get a chance, it's actually quite entertaining. Just search up a few highlights on YouTube, kind of get a feel for it. But I would say, yeah, even in any sport growing up, there was always one or two people at least in my team, and not necessarily celiac disease, but it could be another gluten-related disorder or an intolerance.
And then what do you think, because like, it's funny because in America, people like that even aren't celiac are like, oh, I'm gluten-free. And they're not really gluten-free. They just do it because they think it's cool or it's healthy. What do you think the stigma is behind being gluten-free and being an athlete?
You're right. That fad of people probably jumping on the gluten-free diet, which obviously, yeah, I have nothing against. Like, I'm all for it. Anyone who gets on board that gluten-free lifestyle, I'm a fan of for sure. But I think definitely some people probably can take the gluten-free diet the wrong way because of that, in terms of it might be one of your friends or, it might be a waiter or waitress at a restaurant who doesn't understand the seriousness of the condition if you actually have gluten, and they assume it's just a trend or diet, or don't realize or don't have that awareness of how serious the condition is. And one thing I'm really hoping with the gluten-free athlete is it can also raise awareness, not just for people with, who have to live the gluten-free diet, but also just the wider community, because it definitely for me took a few years to really explain and make my mates and family understand the seriousness of the condition, how it all works. So anyone and anything that can raise awareness is just so important. And I also think as well, there is definitely a stigma, especially around, I'd say, men in sport as well, with coming out and openly speaking about celiac disease. It's not something that I think people would consider a cool thing or something, obviously, they're proud of eating gluten-free. I think it's something they'd rather just, obviously push to the side and pretend it's not a massive issue. But the reality is it's something that really affects and changes your lifestyle. And I know for me, when I found out I was forced to live a gluten-free diet, anyone who could share their experience or inspire me in any way or just provide some help would have just made the world of difference to me. And that's why with the gluten-free athlete, I'm just so so excited and proud that we've been able to share athlete stories and been able to offer advice and tips that can hopefully inspire people who are maybe going through a hard time with the diagnosis or living that gluten-free lifestyle.
Hey, gluten-free friends, it's Liquidy. We know that traveling gluten-free can be hard, but you know what? It doesn't have to be impossible. You can still travel and be independent, have fun, and be in control of your life. Travel the way you want to, even with celiac disease. I know because I travel extensively several months out of the year with celiac disease. If you want to get started on learning more about how to travel gluten-free, grab my free ebook, 10 Tips for Traveling Gluten-Free. In my ebook, you're going to find the basics of traveling gluten-free, from the questions you need to ask when dining out to air travel and cruise travel advice. You're going to find my top tips that I've learned from my expertise. Get your free ebook today by visiting my newly revamped website, www.travelglutenfreepodcast.com. Go to the bottom of the welcome page where you're going to see the beautiful Caribbean boat picture. Click there and sign up today. Receive your free ebook, which is going to be dropped directly into your inbox. Remember, go to www.travelglutenfreepodcast.com. Go to the bottom of the welcome page and get your free ebook and find out my top tips for traveling safely when you're gluten-free. All right, my friends, this is Liquidy, and we're back with Angus, the gluten-free athlete. You definitely want to connect with him, and I'm gonna have Angus at the end of this episode tell you where you can connect with him. If you're watching this video on YouTube, definitely look at the bottom of the screen, and you can see where you can find out more about Angus on his website. So Angus, your story is so incredible because, like a lot of people have on here, right? We just have like our daily normal challenges, but with your being an athlete, I know there's a lot of additional things, because being an athlete, you always have to be at the top shape. Like, you can't be like, oh, I'm not feeling great today, I'm going to take the day off, because that could be a day of a big competition, or it could be a day where you're doing a big trial. And so it's really hard just living with celiac disease and trying to feel as healthy as possible. But like, then you're taking it to the next level with your athleticism. So what have been some of the biggest challenges for you as an athlete with keeping up with, just like, let's just talk about the health aspect first, just keeping your health at a level where you can compete? Because I know like everybody has different symptoms. Like mine are like mostly gastrointestinal, but I also get joint and muscle pain with mine. And I know if I were an athlete, that would really affect my performance.
Yeah, for sure. So for me, I actually really struggled with fatigue. That was the main thing for me, especially when, as I said, I didn't really take the condition as seriously in terms of cross-contamination. I just wasn't fully aware of the diet I had to follow. Obviously, I spoke about not seeing a nutritionist for a few years, which was really concerning looking back on it. So I would heavily get cross-contaminated on so many different occasions, even though I'd try to eat a gluten-free diet, like 100% no cross-contamination, but there were just definitely moments where obviously I would get cross-contaminated, and really affected my performance in terms of I was so sluggish and fatigued. And it wasn't that I was just completely ignoring and eating bread. I was literally just getting cross-contaminated, the smallest bit of gluten, and then I ended up being really fatigued and sluggish. So that was, and obviously I had to get my iron levels up to scratch as well, because I was really deficient in iron when I was first diagnosed, as well as vitamin D. But yeah, physically, that was probably the biggest challenge I had with fatigue, and just managing that, especially when I was early days into diagnosis. In terms of a few mental challenges I had, obviously, I think with the condition, you have to be so organized, especially if you're trying to obviously be an athlete as well. There's just so many different issues. I'm not saying it's a handicap in terms of a challenge that you would have whilst competing, but the reality is other athletes you're competing against, they don't have to stress about accidentally eating gluten and them waking up in the morning feeling so sick they're not able to compete. They're not worried about having slight cross-contamination, which makes them sluggish the next day and not able to perform at their best. And it got to the stage where I actually was really paranoid and anxious before trainings and competition, because I was so nervous I was going to have gluten and it was going to affect my performance. I definitely feel like the awareness between a lot of the coaches and my teammates probably wasn't at the level which would I'd feel comfortable fully explaining to them. I couldn't play or couldn't compete as well because I had gluten, and I think they would just be really confused, to be honest. So that's why it's so important to communicate and be organized.
So yeah, I totally understand what you're saying, because when I travel, I'm really I'm always careful about my diet, but I'm super hyper careful when I travel, because like me and my partner, while we're traveling, he can eat anything he wants to. And then I have celiac disease and like 7 food allergies. So I have to be extremely careful of what I eat. And one of the things I never ever do when I'm on vacation, unless I found a dedicated gluten-free place, is eat pizza. Because if you're going to get cross-contaminated, it's going to be pizza or a place that makes pizza. So I avoid those places like the plague, unless it's in Italy. That's the only thing, because I was in this one place in Italy that was literally steps from the Trevi Fountain. And they had like literally a whole separate kitchen and everything that they made their gluten-free stuff in. So I ate pizza there because I knew that was safe.
I think Italy surprises a lot of people. It's actually quite good with the gluten-free diet, because a lot of people are probably of the same opinion as what I was, in terms of thinking, oh my gosh, Italy, like pizza, pasta, like that's a graveyard. But it's actually, they cater for it really well. And even when I was in Venice last year, I thought that was brilliant. Like, I had so much great food there, never struggled to find a meal. So yeah, it's a bit of a good surprise, I guess.
Yeah. Italy is literally one of the easiest places to travel. And before I went to Italy this summer, I knew I was going to spend 2 days in Rome. And one of the things I definitely wanted was gelato. So I went on the Find Me Gluten-Free app, and I found literally 8 dedicated gelato places within 2 miles of each other in Rome. And I wanted to get to all 8, but I only got to 2.
So when you travel, how organized are you in terms of, do you have a specific itinerary with the restaurants you want to check out, or are you more just, we'll walk around, see if we can find a place?
Yeah, I love that question. I don't know if anybody's ever asked me that on my podcast. It's kind of a combination of both, and it depends on what I'm doing. So if I'm cruising, I eat mostly on the ship, but then sometimes I'll be out. And like, for example, if I know I'm going to a specific port, I will go on the Find Me Gluten-Free app and look for a bakery, because like a dedicated gluten-free bakery, especially in Europe, because European baked goods are at a whole nother level than American based baked goods. Like, we have like donuts and cookies and brownies, which most of the stuff I can make at home. But then when you go over to Europe, then you get like the gluten-free croissants and the multi-level shortbread pastries and all the very fancy things that is extremely hard to find here in the US. So for stuff like that, I do plan ahead, like the important stuff like baked goods and pastries. But and then when I was in Rome, I looked up the gelato, because I'm like, okay, no matter where I'm at, I can find a dedicated gelato place. But if I'm like actually going to stay somewhere for a few days, I do look up like places within a 15-minute drive of wherever I'm staying, because like, I know if it's longer than 15 minutes, I'm probably not going to get there. And I always look for like dedicated gluten-free places. And I'm really fortunate because I live just an hour south of Portland, Oregon. And in Portland, there's more than 50 dedicated gluten-free restaurants. So like every time I go to see one of my friends in Portland, they're like, where do you want to eat? I'm like, hold on, let me see where I haven't eaten yet.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, I'm definitely more of the latter, probably just walk around and try and find something. But I mean, there's so many great resources with, as you said, that Find Me Gluten-Free app. There's so many great blogs around. Obviously, podcasts like this as well are so great and really help. So it's definitely improving in terms of the resources out there to make traveling a lot easier.
Yeah, for sure. And so one of the things I wanted to ask you too, Angus, is what it's like when you started traveling, and maybe even now, like what's like a big challenge for you when you're traveling as a gluten-free athlete, besides what you had talked about earlier? Like, is there another challenge that you have as you being a traveling gluten-free athlete specifically?
Probably the organization, especially when you're eating as a team. If you're wandering off individually, obviously you can find something, but obviously when it's a set kind of meal and menu for the team, that's when I've struggled a little bit. So there was one example. We were traveling interstate last year, and I spoke to the manager prior to us leaving and said, hey, like, this is my situation. I need gluten-free food. And he confirmed, yep, it was all good. We'll have that organized. And then the next night, obviously, when we got to the hotel and went to the lobby, obviously, into one of those function rooms to have dinner, there was just pasta, no gluten-free options. So you can imagine my face. We had a massive game the next day. I was panicking because there was no food for me to eat. The two other guys within the team that were gluten-free weren't selected to play that week, so it was just me. I ended up ordering Uber Eats, found myself with a heavily cross-contaminated gluten-free burrito. The next day, like, I was just shocking, was so sluggish. Stomach was a little bit upset as well. It was just, it was a bit of a disaster, sorry. And obviously I don't blame the manager. I mean, it's really tough. There was obviously a miscommunication somewhere, but it's just those little things that I think some people find it difficult to comprehend how tough that can be on anyone, not necessarily, someone who has to play or compete the next day, just anyone who just has to go about and live their life. It's really difficult. And that's why, I'm really proud that we've been able to create a community with the Gluten-Free Sports Support Facebook group, because it's just people helping each other out. If you want to do a Facebook post just ranting about that situation and get it off your chest, there's hundreds of people who are there to relate to it and, pick you up and help you out. So there's just so many little things that people don't realize. But for me, I feel like it's the little things that, obviously can take its toll the most almost.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. Like, one of the things I experienced recently that by the time we record this, I would have done a podcast on, is I had a celebrity cruise and they mislabeled the food. They said something was gluten-free, and I looked at it and it had fried onions on the top. And the guy behind the counter that was like serving the food didn't know what gluten-free was. So he brought the chef out and I had to ask him, was this in a separate fryer? And he's like, no. And I said, well, you can't label this gluten-free because these onions were in a fryer with something with gluten. Like, a lot of people, either, like you said before, don't know what gluten-free is, and the hardest thing for them to get a grip on is like the food preparation part. Also, it's not just the ingredients, right? Like, a lot of people don't understand that you need to prepare your food a certain way in order for it to be safe. They think like, oh, this doesn't have gluten in it, but then if they use the same utensils, then we get really sick. And for me, like, fried food in a shared fryer, like, even if it's gluten-free ingredients, it makes me the sickest. Like, I get horribly sick the fastest for that.
100%.
Yeah. And it's so challenging to explain to people like why that matters. And I tell people it's for medical reasons. And when I order my food, and this is my thing. Like, I want to slap people about Angus is like, I'll order my food and I'll say, is this gluten-free? And they're like, I'm pretty sure. And I'm sitting there thinking in my head, I'm pretty sure you're not going to be in the bathroom with me for 8 hours if this isn't gluten-free.
Yeah, no, that's very relatable, because especially in Australia as well, all the restaurants, they label gluten-free, but as you said, they don't take into consideration, most restaurants that is, not all, they don't take into consideration the preparation. And like, for me, I love fries, like hot chips, and that's like one of my favorite, like, cheat food almost. And I always get really sick because, a lot of restaurants label gluten-free, but they cook it in the same fryer as something else. So yeah, there's obviously so many challenges with that. And don't worry, I can definitely relate to that.
Yeah, that's why it's so great when you find like a dedicated place. It's like, oh, I don't have to ask the 60 questions and hope I get right answers to all of them.
Yeah, no, that's great.
Yeah, it's like, oh, I feel like a normal person eating. Oh my gosh. So Angus, this has been so much fun with you. Thank you for coming on and sharing like all your experiences. At the end of every podcast, I always ask my interviewees some travel questions and some gluten-free food questions. So are you ready?
Yep, ready to go.
So my first question is, what is a city, region, or place you would highly recommend to a gluten-free traveler? It can be somewhere you visited or where you live now.
I would say Melbourne is quite good for, Melbourne, Australia, obviously is quite good for gluten-free foods, but somewhere I travelled which really surprised me, and I had a lot of great gluten-free foods and always found it so easy just walking around to find a gluten-free option, was in Prague. So I loved Prague. I think it's an amazing city, by the way. Just the architecture and everything about the place I really enjoyed, but the gluten-free food was also really good. So never really struggled to find a meal there. So yeah, really enjoyed Prague.
Oh my gosh, I'm so excited to hear that because Prague has been on my hit list for like a decade now. And that's just another reason why I need to bump it up on my travel list. Prague. Yes. Oh my gosh, that sounds amazing. Okay.
Yeah.
So, what is your next trip you're taking or thinking about taking?
Actually thinking of heading back over to Europe next year and try and escape an Australian winter. So that's my next trip. Will definitely be a lot more organised than when I last went over to Europe. So yeah, please send through any tips you may have.
Oh, yes. Greek beaches are amazing. I can tell you that right now because when I went on my Mediterranean
Awesome.
cruise this past summer, I was at a few Greek beaches. Absolutely love them. They're beautiful.
Perfect. Yeah, Greece is definitely on the bucket list. So that might be my first stop.
Awesome. You can just check off, hit two birds with one stone and do your escape winter getaway and hit Greece at the same time.
Yeah. No, that would be awesome. That's exciting.
All right. So on to the gluten-free food questions. What is the food you miss most and why?
I probably shouldn't be saying this, but I absolutely loved KFC. I think KFC, the fried chicken, it was just such a good cheap food. I thought it was so nice just to be able to snack on that occasionally. And I guess that's one of the good things. I think a bit of a silver lining is gluten-free diet really forces you to think about what you eat. And I know my relationship with food ever since I was diagnosed has just improved so much. And literally, I think about everything I eat. I think I eat so much healthier as well, and I think that's probably one of the main positives that have come out of this situation. But I would also say it's just the little things, like the really simple things like bread, pasta. Even though there are good gluten-free options around, I think it's just like, for example, as you said, with a few of those pizza places, you order a pizza, but then you also end up paying. Last night I ended up paying an extra $7 for a gluten-free base on top of the pizza. So not only is the base not even as good as the normal bases, but you also have to pay an extra $7. So it's just the little things like that.
Yeah, I just ended up deciding that I'm just making my pizza at home from now on because it's so much easier. I know it's safe and I don't have to pay the extra $7 to $10 for a tiny little pizza that may make me sick. No, I'm totally with you on that. And have you found any, I actually found a dedicated gluten-free place that does fried chicken, outside Seattle, Washington. Have you found any places like that near you?
There's definitely a few gluten-free dedicated restaurants, and there's, luckily enough, actually, there's one right around the corner from my house, which I only just found out about through doing a lot of research, which is bizarre because I drove past it every day. They didn't really advertise that they were gluten-free, but it was a fully FODMAP restaurant. It has all those foods, so it has some of my favourites as well. They do great sandwiches. They do chicken schnitzels. Yeah, so that's, as you said, I probably, due to the convenience and just knowing I can act like an normal eater, I do go there a fair bit.
Yeah, I found a place near me that it was like a juice bar that had like bowls and some other things. And a gal that has a crepe truck bought it out, but she makes all the crepes gluten free. So I go there at least twice a month to get crepes because it's literally the only. Because I've gone other places, but they use the griddle for both, and I just can't eat there because it's not safe. Because I can never properly clean those griddles. And so, yeah, I was super excited when I found out that someone new bought it, and she does all gluten free crepes.
Oh my gosh, perfect. Yeah, crepes there are actually a few good gluten-free crepes, little carts and vans in Australia as well, which have been really good. But yeah, no, hopefully I can find a few in Europe as well.
Oh, nice. Yeah, Australia's been on my bucket list too, so I need to get over there sooner than later for sure. Okay, so my next question, what is the best gluten-free food you've recently eaten? It can be from a restaurant, from something you made at home, something you bought at the supermarket.
Ooh, good question. I would say I've been really enjoying paellas. I've been able to find some really good gluten-free paellas. So with chicken, chorizo, vegetables, that's probably been the main. Yeah, that's probably been the main thing recently that I've been able to find some great options, and they're just really tasty as well.
And so is that a food brand in Australia?
Oh no, so that's a Spanish dish. So it's like rice, paella, yeah, So it's like rice, vegetables. Yeah, no, it's perfect. Yeah, it's also a great pre-event or pre-training meal as well.
Yeah, I've never seen anybody make it with gluten, which is great. And I actually have a really good girlfriend where I used to live. She's Venezuelan, and oh my gosh, her paella is like off the charts. It's so good. So anytime, like we used to do dinner parties, and if my friend Fanny from Venezuela would host, she's like, "What do you want? What do you want me to make?" I'm like, "Paella. Just make your paella."
No, they're perfect. Love them.
Yeah, like, no question. Just make it. She's like, "But I made it last time." I'm like, "I don't care. Just make it again."
Perfect.
Okay, so my last question for you, Angus, if a magic genie could grant a wish for you to eat 3 regular food items, and I think I know what one is, for your birthday, what 3 food items would you pick?
Ooh, I would go. One would definitely just be a normal pizza. One would be one would just be bread. I still really struggle to find good gluten-free bread, to be honest with you.
What kind of bread would you eat? Like, would it be Hawaiian bread, whole grain, like cinnamon toast bread?
Just straight white bread. Yeah,
Fluffy
just
white
honestly,
bread.
yeah, just something that actually tastes half decent. So I'm still on the lookout for good gluten-free bread. Yeah, any suggestions are more than welcome. And then the last would just be a bit of a cheat meal. I just love it. Love to go to KFC and just order whatever I wanted.
I totally get that. Yeah. So 2 breads. I don't know if you guys have them in Australia, because I know it depends on, manufacturing, and international is completely different. But 2 breads that I found are decent are Canyon Bakehouse. And also there's another one called Franz, Franz. And I believe they both make Hawaiian bread too, which is like one of my favorite types of gluten-free bread.
Yeah, what is Hawaiian bread? I've actually never heard of that.
So Hawaiian bread is kind of like it's a very sweet bread. It's like made with like honey and something else. I don't know that it's actually from Hawaii. I think people just call it Hawaiian bread. But it's like
Yeah.
if you look up if you Google on the internet Hawaiian sweet rolls, you'll see a picture, and it usually has like egg in it, so you can't find a vegan version. It's just it's like a sweeter tasting bread.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, no, I'll definitely look that up. That sounds great.
Yeah, but I know Canyon Bakehouse and Franz both have Hawaiian bread, and when I find those, I'm like buying for actually I just went online today to find some in the local supermarket, and they were like all sold out of Hawaiian bread. I'm like, oh darn it.
That ruins your day.
So Angus, I'm going to put your information at the bottom of this video, but for people who are not watching the video and they're just listening to the audio, tell people where they can find you, like on your social media channels, and then also on your website, because you have an amazing blog, and I've read almost every article on it, and it's really great.
Awesome. Yep. So obviously you can see the website as well there, www.theglutenfreeathlete.com.au, but also our Instagram handle. That's where most of our content gets put. So that's at TGF Athlete. And another place I think which is really important, and one of my favorite parts of the Gluten-Free Athlete, is our Facebook group. So that's our community of like-minded people, and it's not necessarily people trying to be professional athletes. It's anyone who might just want to go for a run once a week or wants to start going to the gym again. It just offers a lot of tips, help, support, a place for you to rant if you want to rant. And there's so many great people who are willing to give up their time and help. So that's probably my favorite part of the Gluten-Free Athlete. So if you want to search up on Facebook, the Gluten-Free Sport Support Group, you'll be able to find it on our website as well. So I think, any of those places, if you want to get involved and have a look, you are more than welcome to join our community.
Awesome. And I definitely have not connected you with you on the community, so I'm definitely going to jump into that. But Angus, this has been so great. And for anybody that's listening, just so you know, I'll put this information in the show notes. So if you're listening to the audio, scroll underneath the album cover and you'll see the links that Angus has mentioned in the show notes. This has been awesome. And I'm so glad you came on to share your story, Angus. I know everyone that's listening got a lot of value out of it and definitely related to all your stories. So thanks again for coming on and making the time to be on the Travel Gluten-Free podcast.
No worries. Thanks for having me. This was great fun.
Travel Gluten-Free Podcast is a production of Travel Gluten-Free LLC. Looking for a great way to connect with over 2,000 consumers per month? Contact Aliquity for information on sponsorship levels to boost your business. Subscribe today so you won't miss a single episode of Travel Gluten-Free. Subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Pandora, Spotify, Stitcher, or wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts.